now's the right time to stand up for freedom? Could it be when you start to feel creating children who'll inherit the pain and the debt of this nation and be slaves to the banks that cause hyperinflation, who are masters of commerce, lies, and bad legislation? Whoa, if you looked in the eyes of 1,000 young children through fences of razors, their innocence stolen as the red flag of tyranny flies in the open, is that when you finally notice? Whoa, whoa, but I'm only a stranger here. I'm a long, long way from my home, and they say I can't change all the things I find strange, for what can one man do alone?
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of The Liberty Test, a podcast where mostly normal people who just happen to be libertarians try and make sense of government actions and see if they can be made to conform with libertarian philosophy or if it's all just pie in the sky. So joining me today are a few fellow normal people who just happen to be libertarians. We've got Robert Schuon, Karyn Thompson, Rose Leatherman, and Pietro Geraci. Everybody want to introduce yourself real quick and tell us a little bit about your role in the libertarian movement? Then we can discuss our topic today, which is congestion pricing in New York. Rob, we want to start with you?
Sure. Bob Schuon, chair of the Suffolk County Libertarian Party, libertarian for a long time, and been seeing a lot of these issues lately. One of the main reasons I don't go into New York City with a car, ever.
Karyn, how about you?
Hi, Karyn Thompson, Saratoga County Libertarian, treasurer, former state committee member. And I've just started researching the topic in preparation for the show. And wow, it's horrible. I'm excited to talk about it.
Rose, what about you?
Rose Leatherman. I'm the secretary of the Onondaga County Libertarian Party, state committee member of the Libertarian Party of New York, and lifelong small L libertarian. Good to be here again.
And Pietro, this is your first time with us. Tell us
Yes.
a little about you.
Well, sure. So my name is Pietro. I am the vice chair of the Orange County Libertarian Party. I'm also the outreach director for the Libertarian Party of New York, and I'm very excited to be here. In addition, I also play the bagpipes, and I sing in the local community choir.
We're not going to let you do either of those things tonight, sir.
I like the pipes. Hey, wait a minute.
They have to be played well. Maybe I'll listen to Pietro play one of these days. And by the way, I'm Dan Castello, and I'm the vice chair of the New York Libertarian Party. And I was chair of the platform committee. So when we were all working together trying to create the platform, we wanted to see if actions that we wanted government to take could fit within a libertarian platform. And we came up with what we decided to call the Liberty Test. We would run the government action or the proposed action through our platform to see if it could fit, or if it didn't, if it could be made to be fit, and if it didn't, then maybe it didn't belong as a government action. So tonight, we're going to talk about congestion pricing. As Karyn said, this is a pretty new topic to me, too. I live in upstate New York, and the closest thing to this that I deal with is the thruway, which I almost never take. So, Karyn, I know you were just telling us a little bit about what the proposed congestion pricing arrangement would be. Do you want to do that on air for us?
It's
so we're
not
all on the
proposed
same page?
anymore. It's live.
Well, yeah.
So it's $9 during peak hours and $2.25 during off-peak hours. So even in the middle of the night and the overnight, there's still somewhat of a fee. But I've crunched the numbers. So you also have to pay. You have to take either the GWB or the Lincoln Tunnel to get both in and out of Manhattan, right? So if you took the Lincoln Tunnel, it would cost you $24.38 to get in during the day. And if you wanted to then leave after that, it would be a total of $33.38 per day. And if you took the GWB, it would be $35.63.
Well, keep in mind, some of the tunnels, the bridges, like the GW is one-way toll. Outgoing is free. So,
Okay.
also, I'm a lifelong New Yorker and from the Bronx, so I grew up in the Bronx. So here's the deal: there are free bridges in and out, but like you said, if you're coming from New Jersey, no, there's no free way to get into the city. It's very difficult. Like theoretically, you might be able to do it, but most of the inbound bridges are tolled. The outbound parts are free, so to speak, because you're paying on the inbound side. But certain ones are uh, toll, but mostly it's inbound. Inbound is always where they apply the toll system, and
Okay.
but you have like the Third Avenue Bridge, the 59th Street Bridge, and for years this has galled the politicians for because they aren't able to collect fees of all, and of course the congestion that they speak of is because all the trucks, all the people that come in every single day, all the ones that know the system, they all take the free bridges. So they come in on the Third Avenue Bridge and go down the FDR Drive, or they'll come over the 59th Street Bridge, which is why the 59th Street Bridge in the morning is a disaster area because the trucks are trying to come in, the commuters are trying to come in, and then they're all spreading out from that point. Same thing with the Williamsburg Bridge. It's another, again, those are because they physically couldn't put the tolls on them because there was no room to do it in. So they had to kind of leave certain of the free ones. I believe there was also a legal issue there. Like if they made it toll the whole way, like every bridge and every tunnel, it violated the Constitution somehow. Now I'm just going by years ago when this goes all the way back into the 70s, like 1970 and up, where they had this discussion of because they wanted tolls on every bridge, every tunnel, and basically they were told, no, you can't. You're basically restricting people's movement at that point, so they were kept from doing it. So this is just another scheme by the politicians to try and get around that restriction, and I would have the same objections, really. I mean, so
It's interesting that you mentioned that because, while we're talking about this, all I can think about is that from at least a superficial understanding of it, isn't this what a free market would do? If there's demand to get into a place and there's infrastructure required to do it, don't we have to maintain that infrastructure? And right now, isn't that the responsibility of government? So shouldn't they be charging fees from the people who are using that infrastructure?
Right. I mean, technically, if the demand for travel on this particular road has increased at certain times of day, you could make the argument that, okay, because it's creating scarcity, prices will rise alongside the increased demand for this particular road. It just becomes an issue, though, when it's a state-owned road that we have already paid for. It raises the question of, okay, is this really something that we should be double charged for, or is this just yet another money-making scheme by the state?
Well, I mean, their justification is that by charging drivers a fee, the number of vehicles entering the congested areas is expected to decrease, and that leads to smoother traffic flow and probably helps people get to work and do economic stuff and improves quality of life, right? And then speaking of that, they also are concerned about the environment, right? So if there's fewer vehicles on the road, there's less pollution, there's better air quality, better public
all right,
health,
but
and
but Dan, let's say you lived in that area. Okay, you have a house, you have maybe a parking lot or a driveway, and now you're being charged at minimum 225 or 275, whatever it was, and at maximum $9 to access your own property or to leave to go to the store or basically anything.
well,
Um,
would it be more fair then in a libertarian system if people who already lived there and didn't agree to this when they bought their property were just grandfathered in and they didn't have to
well,
pay the
see, that's the
tolls?
problem is they're not.
Hmm.
And imagine the situation as well where let's say you have a house in the middle of the street. Would it be fair for the neighbors on either side of you to get together, decide to charge you a toll to access your section of the road?
think we call that piracy.
Well, this is, you see here, you see the issue here is that it's denying you use of your property without
But doesn't traffic do the same thing? I mean, if too many people try to use the road, nobody can use the road. But if more people use public transit, right, wouldn't that help? And then they could use the fees that they generate from this toll to fund improvements to the Metropolitan Transportation Authority,
and
right?
now we're back to the same argument we tend to end up with every podcast is that that's great if it was voluntary. If everybody
Right.
wanted to do
Or
that.
viable.
Is there a demand for public transport? I mean,
Yes.
in theory, there should be. When you have a bunch of people living close together who don't necessarily want to have to own a car, one would think that there would naturally be demand for public transportation.
Well, there is, but there's demand for safe public transport.
It's-
And therein is the problem. And we just had last week that someone was set on fire on the subway.
Oh yeah,
And I think even
ties
like
to our
today
next-
or yesterday, there was an incident, and there's been tons of incidents on the subway. People being pushed onto the tracks, or fights breaking out, or all sorts of stuff happening. Like at one point, they had to call in the National Guard or something to ensure safety on the subways. I mean, that's absurd. You don't see that anywhere
It
else.
sounds very expensive. Don't they need more funding?
Gee.
Well, I think they would get that funding if they actually, enforced people having to pay to go onto the subway. I mean, you don't have to go very far to see people jumping the turnstiles. And I'm not saying that you have to put heavy sentences on those, but you can't just let them run rampant, skipping out on the fares. I mean, they're losing so much in revenue to that. And then they want to put that on the backs of law-abiding citizens who are just trying to drive to work, drive to the store, drive to their own property, as you've stated. And you're shifting sort of, not the blame, so to speak, but you're shifting the burden, and that's not fair. You would have more money if you just enforced the fees, and that maybe you should be arresting people. I mean, if I stole a candy bar from a grocery store, I'd just be arrested.
Not
I'd probably
anymore.
be sentenced to community. Well, now you get the bail reform mess, but in most areas, right outside of New York, I'd be arrested. And I probably would be given community service. I wouldn't be a heavy sentence, but I'd be given something. I'd have a record, right? It's like there should be the same thing here. Maybe it's community service. Maybe it doesn't have to be a heavy-handed punishment, but there has to be some sort of consequence to jumping the turnstile. And on top of that, going beyond the subway, Metro North, commuter railroads, right? West of the Hudson service is abysmal. Like if you look at the schedules for like the Port Jervis line or the Pascack Valley line, it's like one train in the morning every 2 hours or something. Like even during rush hour, during peak travel times, there's not a lot of trains. Whereas east of the Hudson, you have a train that runs maybe every 15, 20 minutes during rush hour. West of the Hudson, it's paltry compared to that. And so you have a lot of people who would commute by rail, but they can't because the schedule just doesn't work for them. It doesn't line up properly, and they have no choice but to drive into Manhattan, to drive to the city. So you mentioned the demand. Well, unfortunately, that demand is sort of inelastic because for a lot of commuters in the Orange County area, Rockland County, and maybe even to an extent Sullivan County and Ulster County, there is no alternative. Like they have to drive because maybe the bus schedules aren't good or the train schedules aren't good. There's no alternative there. And even Democratic senators like James Skoufis have talked about this, that they need alternatives, and it's not fair to them to have to pay the congestion pricing. I know that folks in New Jersey, I mean, you said it too, right? None of the bridges and tunnels from New Jersey go into a free area of Manhattan. Like if you come out and boom, you're hit with congestion fees. Like that's completely unfair to the folks in New Jersey too. So it's
but
it's
it's
a
New
whole
Jersey,
mess.
so who cares about that? I mean, now I'm just kidding, New Jersey people. Don't get all in an uproar, but that's what the governor thinks. I mean, come on, she must, because that's basically all of their objections to this were completely ignored. And
Well, everyone's objections were ignored because
No,
that's how
that too.
the government works. Objections be damned.
Yep.
If you're jumping turnstiles, though, okay, so suppose that you're already being taxed to pay for a public transport system that you did not consent to, and then you jump the turnstile so that you're not charged a second time. Isn't that really just reclaiming something that already is by rights yours because you were made to pay for it against your will? You could very easily make an argument that it's not really stealing if it's something that you're already being forced to fund.
You have a right to go into the living room of the mafia boss who you pay protection money to.
Yeah, exactly. Intellectually, that may be valid.
Technically, yes.
But
However,
in reality, it
that's
presents
just-
certain
that's
problems.
That's
It's also
because
more the safety
they're
thing.
an armed gang who will stop you from doing so. However, if I was forced to fund the construction of his living room, yeah, that is my labor. That was the product of my labor. Yeah, by rights, it should be mine, per libertarian theory.
I mean, you would think the New York City subway, one of the busiest in the world, would generate enough revenue to be able to function without additional tax revenue. So I think the proper angle would be to say that your taxes shouldn't be paid for this because it's literally like one of the busiest, if not the busiest transit system. I don't know if is it the busiest? I'm going to have to look this up.
I believe it
It's
is.
definitely
I believe,
up there.
and it's the only one that runs 24 hours a day, which is
Yeah, that's true.
How could something like this be run profitably by a private institution, though?
easily give it to a private institution. Let me tell you, it would instantly start making money. Why? Because a private institution would have an incentive to make money, whereas the government can do things like, add congestion pricing in the city to basically tax people that want that need to drive. It's not even wanting to drive, okay? Because it's if you're a truck driver and you have to deliver, like I have some knowledge on this because I used to have a client that we had to deliver materials to in the city. And we were subjected to the absurd situation of here you are in Manhattan. They had no loading dock. You were not allowed to even stop. There are no stopping, no standing signs are surrounding the entire building because this is central Manhattan. So you have a police officer saying, move or you get a ticket. I'm like, I'm delivering to the building. He goes, yeah, move or you get a ticket. Like, think of the absurdity of that situation and the difficulties it imposes with trying to do business, with an entity in New York City to begin with. Now tack on the fact that for the privilege of being chased away from the building, they'll charge you $9, right off the bat. So it's...
From a business point of view, I actually have a client like this on Eagle Street in Albany. There's no parking, and I run a window cleaning and pressure washing business. We can't schlep ladders and buckets and equipment, for blocks. So we accept that we're going to get a ticket, and we literally include it in their invoice.
It's
not put it in there like parking fee.
Yep. New York City though, they'll tow you. Like they'll literally just be like, if you don't move, I'm going to call a tow truck and he's going to hook you up and take you. It's like we would literally this is how stupid it was. We would sit there at the light, unloading things out of the truck, right, till the light turned green. Then we would put it back in drive around the block, nice and slow to make sure the light turned back to red, and then do the whole thing again. Like this is how idiotic it is.
It is idiotic. I make house calls for a living. I'm a dog trainer, and I hate going into the city. And I actually raised my prices to where they're at now, in part to not have clients contact me from the city.
Well, but that's not just that. But what you're doing is you're passing along. That's all that happens here is you're passing along the costs.
It's not just the cost. Yes,
well,
half of what I make for a session is going to go to the parking ticket.
Yeah.
No, really.
Does this interfere with the freedom of mobility?
Yeah, just a little bit.
I was going to ask that. Where exactly is
the city? So the justification, though, that I've seen from politicians is that, this will allow people to actually get into the city if they want to, go to dinner, which, that's very telling because I'm pretty sure they're talking about themselves. They want the freedom to travel unobstructed to their own dinner reservations. But no, about passing the cost on to the consumer, though, that's a very good point because this, you have to pay more to get into the city if you want to go out to dinner. Maybe you'll have an easier time getting into the city. Maybe you'll have an easier time getting to your reservation on time. But will you end up paying more for dinner? Whoever has to work at the restaurant is now going to have to pay an additional fee to go to their job and work as a waiter or a cook or whatever. So
that just raise the minimum wage.
Clearly.
this is again, it's all part and parcel of the same idea, is that you can basically repeal the laws of economics and do whatever you want, and there's going to be no consequences. And guess what? There's going to be consequences of this. And what's going to happen? Yes, less people are going to go to the city. Less people are going to spend money in the city. Less people are going to use the parking facilities in the city. So all that 18% parking tax that they impose on everyone, that's going to go down. The fact that any gas stations in the city, because usually you find a gas station in the city, you have to pay whatever price they charge because there isn't anything else around it. They're going to lose business, so they're going to pay, and there's a lot of gas tax on that. So again, you're robbing for Peter to pay Paul is what you're doing. Like the MTA might collect more money. That's who's going to win on all of this.
It seems to me
And
like
it's just
they're
going to be
trying to
wasted.
discourage driving altogether and limit people to the approved transportation mechanisms. I can't imagine why they'd want to do that, but
I wonder. Oh,
Look,
please.
I'm
That
all
is,
for public transit, but it has to be safe. It has to be efficient. It has to work with people's schedules.
yeah, you have to want to do
it's just not. It's not any of those things. And so people, like, who wants to go on the subway? You can be set on fire, like, or something else could happen to you.
Huh?
Like, it's not safe.
Pushed onto the tracks. There were several incidents last year. It happens
yeah.
all the time on the subway.
wait a minute.
And
though,
you
isn't
can't
that-
defend yourself, or you'll be arrested if you
Oh yeah,
try.
and it'll be like
Well, now you get to
uh,
Daniel
Marines,
Penny.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, guy.
it's illegal to carry any kind of self-defense implement. If you fight back at all, there's a chance that you could be charged with assault or murder. So
Well, it sounds
Yeah, and
like
then
we're
Alvin
making
Bragg
the
goes
case.
after you.
Sounds like we're making the case, though, for more of a police presence and more authoritarian government. I mean, if you think about what they say about, places like Singapore, where crime is, almost unheard of. I mean, they have insane levels of draconian punishment.
No, we're
And
actually
it
saying
is
the exact
clean and
opposite.
safe.
Is that if we were allowed to defend ourselves, these incidents wouldn't happen.
So
Okay.
my
Or if
elderly
the MTA was
parents should have to
privatized.
go into the city
Yeah.
with shotguns and
The MTA was privatized, they would have an incentive to make it safe. They would hire their own private security that carries insurance with no qualified immunity. Everything would improve like exponentially overnight.
what do you
Right,
think they
yeah,
would charge
so-
for this service?
the laws of economics still apply to security guards. Like, if they're doing a poor job, you can fire them and hire a different security firm. If they're like randomly assaulting law-abiding citizens, you can press charges, you can sue them. So the problem is when you have when you are reliant on the state because it has a monopoly on security. Yeah, you're stuck working with them. If they do a terrible job, what are you going to do? You can't really sue them. You're unlikely to, if you try to press charges against them, you're very unlikely to succeed, and it'll just come out of taxpayer money anyway, and there'll be no real consequences. Nothing will really change.
Yeah.
And this is what it's to libertarians. It's a really strange sort of mindset because it's like they only live in the now. Like you know what I mean? Like it's like a 5-year-old. Okay, is that I want it now? Okay, but you realize that later on this is going to happen. But I want it now. And it makes no sense because the things that they're going to destroy far outnumber any benefit that this extra income might have. Because again, you're going to destroy the theaters, you're going to destroy the restaurants, you're going to destroy the parking lots, you're going to destroy the thing, and you're going to destroy. How much more will a business have to pay someone like me to work in the city? Okay, I had already run the numbers, and it's like 30 or 40% more than a normal salary just for the travel, the hassle, the costs. Because at the time I checked, I think it was like $350 a month for a Long Island Railroad pass. Okay, and now it's like over $400. I don't even know the exact number anymore because I wouldn't be crazy enough to buy one. But think of all of that additional cost simply to avoid them charging you $9 a day. or it's not even a day though. You got to be careful because I think the law reads if you leave the exclusion zone or whatever you want to call it, the congestion zone, and come back in, you get billed again. It's not just a daily fee. It's every time you enter the zone.
So imagine that for delivery drivers then.
Oh yeah, the costs are going to be phenomenal. Because if you have a delivery down on 23rd Street, then you got to go up to 150th Street and then come back down. I believe you're getting back. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that's how it reads.
Is it the entire width of Manhattan?
No, it's a central. It's like
I know it's from like
There's zones.
yeah.
I know it's a zone.
Yes, I had it pulled up. The Google
like
a lot.
59th or something. I forget exactly where. It was like Midtown Manhattan.
Yeah.
Say does it stretch from not lengthwise but widthwise?
From river to river, I don't know. I'm not sure. But
I would imagine.
But like, can you go down the West Side Highway and avoid it? No,
well,
that
remember the West Side
ends
Highway
by that
ends.
Point. That's right. Wait a minute. That ends. It shows you how much I drive on.
Yeah, I know. But even like if you're on West Avenue and and all that, it's no like. But it doesn't matter because if the place you have to access is inside the zone, you have no choice. You have to access
that's
it.
true.
Well, hold on. That's an argument against a free market solution because a free market requires competition, right? And if there's only so many physical ways that you can get into the city, doesn't that require an entity, like the government or some monopolistic organization, to control everything? And then we can keep them in check, through the ballot box, right? So if they raise rates too high, like through their tolls, we can hold them accountable. Isn't that better than allowing some profit-seeking entity to price gouge everybody because no competition is possible?
And see, here's the problem: is that we already paid for the roads, and the fact that we are human beings, we have the right to travel. Okay, and the government is at that point then acting like the mafia. There's no distinction because if they get to basically take that whole thing and basically tell you, well, you can't come in here unless you pay, then it's a bar and it's a cover charge. And, what'll happen, see, the real life effects are completely different from what they envision. Because the real life effects will simply be people will avoid Manhattan. Restaurants will find their costs going up, right? And their clientele going down, and they'll close. And they'll move elsewhere, or they'll move out of. You know what? I see a great resurgence for Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx because
and Hoboken.
Yeah, Hoboken. See, there you go. Right? Because why not stay in New Jersey at that point? Why wouldn't you move your business to New Jersey? You'll save your workers how many thousands of dollars by simply relocating.
And the taxes are probably a little bit lower too.
Isn't that people voting with their feet though? Isn't that technically what's supposed to happen?
Well, there you go.
That's what people have been doing.
You can't.
Everything below 60th Street. Can you guys see that?
Have got.
So this is the whole width.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's everything 60th Street and south.
South, right? It does.
Wow.
It's
Well,
bad.
that's where everything is. Like, there's nothing above 60. It's shit.
No, that's not true. There's a lot. There's actually a lot more to Upper Manhattan than people think, but the main business districts are down there. Here's a good one for you. The New York Stock Exchange is right in the middle of that exclusion, of that congestion zone. So imagine what all these stockbrokers are going to do. There are already rumblings of moving the stock market out of New York. They've threatened it for years. See, what's going to happen, though, is my guess would be they'll start giving out exemptions to people. You'll see the politically connected will get exemptions. The people that they need will get exemptions.
I'm sure Kat Vogel won't have any problem getting into the city so she can get to her dinner reservations on time.
Exactly.
I'm sure the stockbrokers and the
government vehicles,
NYPD and any other government workers are going to have no problem getting into the city.
Yep. Better befriend
What
somebody.
happens so that you can apply for a variance?
Well, the interesting
the
part.
only people that'll be granted them will be like,
The interesting part is, what about like sanitation workers and stuff that have to drive to the vehicle for the sanitation department might be exempt, but the driver has to get to work.
Well, Bob, you're actually bringing up interesting points here. Government loves to be able to hand out
Yeah, hand
privilege
out their little
passes.
favors. It's
It
like,
gives them all the power,
yep.
right? That's what they want.
Oh,
So
they already.
actually, this solves their problem. This is great. This is
And
exactly
then
what.
we have to be grateful. Like, okay, I'm a sanitation worker. I have to get into the city. Well, thankfully, the government was there to give me this exemption I desperately needed. I should be grateful to them,
And to
ignoring the
my
fact that they
union boss, who
created
I
the
pay the
problem in the
dues to.
first place. Yeah,
Well, if you
the
have a
standard.
specialized government-owned vehicle, you get an exemption. You don't have to pay.
So government gets to hand out special favors. They don't
Mm-hmm.
get personally affected by the negative aspects of this. They get to go to whoever is pulling their puppet strings and say, look what we're doing for the climate by reducing pollution. They get to claim that they're trying to help public transit, but they just need more government grants from the federal, government to fix those issues like people being lit on fire. And so from the politician's perspective, it's a win-win-win-win, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So the libertarian solution then would be to sell the infrastructure to private entities to run. What would prevent them from pursuing the same incentives? Since, as I mentioned before, you can't really go and build a new tunnel very
Well,
economically.
now be careful about that, okay? Because here's the deal. Let's say you're the one with the rights to the Brooklyn Bridge and you're going to charge $30 one way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's to say you don't get a consortium that says, wait a second, we could go and build a new bridge right next to it and charge 15 and make
Oh,
a
wait.
bundle.
And
Well,
that would work great as long as there's no government to refuse to give you the permit to do it. It's
That's,
almost as if
yeah.
government is an obstruction to the free market.
Gee, yeah,
so
it's funny how that
you're
works.
saying you're talking about privatization, which I see
Theoretically
a lot of
speaking.
libertarians making this error. Like they'll confuse privatization with free markets. In actuality, privatization usually refers to the state taking state assets that we've all paid for via taxes and then selling them off to a private entity without any compensation to the people who have been funding that service or good or whatever the state had a monopoly on. So what frequently happens is they'll sell off a state asset, they'll grant a private, usually state connected corporation, an exclusive monopoly on that service, and then they'll bar anyone else from entering the market.
See,
So
that's what difference is that?
it's still state run,
Right.
but it's only nominally private.
That's the literal economic definition of fascism. Is
Yeah,
where where you might not legally own it, in quotes, but the state controls every aspect of it because if you don't have the state license, you can't operate it. Kind of like the cable systems work. Like
right.
This is one of those
Telecommunications and power companies, things like that. Like, they're private in name only, basically, but they often operate with even less accountability than a state-run service would, because they can be like, well, they can cut you off because they're a private company, so they can remove you from their service if you have the wrong political opinions or you have a criminal record or whatever else they come up with. It can be.
Don't even get me started about, because that goes back to Long Island's have a real bad deal because we went from Lilco to Lipa to now it's the company from New Jersey. What the heck is that? The power company from New Jersey. That literally, a power company from New Jersey now takes care of Long Island's lighting needs, which is like so. You want to talk about zero accountability? There you go, because they're protected by the state and they have a state contract, but they have sorry if something goes wrong. Well, oh well. So it's crazy. Like these aspects of it are just. It's just ways to escape responsibility, and I have a whole lecture on, if you ever want to talk about that sometime, is that how
definitely.
the state escaped the $8 billion it took to shut down a nuclear power plant by spreading it around and changing the names of the companies a few times. So it's literally money laundering in reverse. Debt laundering. It's pretty funny. Yeah. But yes, this is this is how the state plays games and calls it private, but it's
Mhm.
it's only in name, and the state still has complete control over all of it, and not to our benefit.
What
So
would
I
be
think if
the
we
order?
really want to clean this up, you need to clean up the MTA. I mean, aren't they getting these huge bonuses and stuff? Like, why are the salaries and bonuses so high for a public agency? That doesn't make any sense. And I think there should be a law that says the MTA is not allowed to use tax dollars. Period.
No,
No
then they
taxes.
instantly go bankrupt. You're like the post office, you know.
Then they go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Then they go bankrupt, and someone else comes in, takes over, and fixes it up.
Well, people,
Because I don't think they have this problem in Boston or Chicago or Los Angeles, where they have other with these metro systems. Like, I mean, I'm sure they have their own corruption, but like, I don't think it's to this. No one's getting set on fire at the Chicago on the L train on the L. Like that's not happening. Or
You
on the
read my
Silver
mind.
Line.
I was going to ask, what is the order of operations to get from what we have now to a libertarian acceptable solution?
Well, I
So
think you
would
can
start
private.
with-
Start with what? I'm sorry. What?
you would start with letting the MTA declare bankruptcy.
Yeah, because then it goes to court, and then all the stuff that's swept under the rug comes out, right? Because they're going to have their creditors, and the deceptive practices that are going on will be exposed, and all these bonuses that are being paid out, which again doesn't make any sense. No public employee should be getting a bonus. Like that, I think.
well, give me a moment, because I'm going to give everybody a little history lesson here. Okay, the New York City subway was privately owned. Okay, the reason
That's
you
right.
have the IRT, the IND, and the BMT, where they were three separate companies that hated each other, of course. They competed with each other, and they ran the subway system until New York City basically hijacked it from all of them, took everything away, and made it into one giant subway system. Okay? But their accomplishments are things like the Second Avenue subway took 99 years. It was started in 1922 and was finally finished in like 2021 when they finally opened the Second Avenue subway. It was almost 100 years to dig, what, a half a mile of subway line? I think it was.
That's it.
Yeah. Look at the Long Island, the East
Oh, yeah.
East Side Access.
I've been following
Going on
that.
for like 50 years. It was ridiculous. Like the East Side Access project's been going on for. I literally cannot understand it myself, because the Long Island Railroad runs under the East River, and it runs into Penn Station.
Yeah.
Okay, and the Amtrak runs into Grand Central.
No.
You're telling me it takes you that many years to be able to cross-connect the line so you can run subway trains into Grand Central Station? Like, it just boggles the mind. Like,
well, there are some problems there, and that the third rail is different for Metro North versus the LIRR.
Yeah, that's
that there was, but I think the solution
we put
would
men on
just be to
the
stick a
moon, put
different
people on the moon,
locomotive.
you know, so I think.
I mean, you stick P32 diesel, electro diesel on there, and you're good to go. Like that
Right.
would have been easy, and then you just throw it on like it can run diesel power on above ground. Then you just go on the Hellgate Bridge, you go around.
They
It
already
takes a little
have
bit longer.
already has them, so it's the whole thing.
Yeah,
But this is
the whole project made no
realize
sense.
this is what they're trying to dig up money for. Like they did it with the bridges. Realize that the actual maintenance on the bridge isn't 5% of the toll revenue that they generate. Okay, to maintain all those bridges. Yet the bridges are still having troubles, having structural issues and all of that, but the MTA gets all the cash. And now they're doing the same with going downtown Manhattan. What are they going to do? Just set up fences at some point, and if you want to walk into Manhattan, they're going to give me cash. You know, like, how far do we go with this, with the government insisting on, you know, taxing people for walking down the street? I mean, it's literally gonna get to that point at some point, you know.
Oh, I'm sure it will. Don't give them ideas. We'll do it.
Well, that's,
They already have that idea. They
Oh,
wanna
we have to
divide
fund these,
cities into sectors, and you
Mhm.
have to stay within your your zone.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah,
our.
I mean, we fund these sidewalks, so therefore, how are we going to maintain these sidewalks if we don't keep getting funding? So
Well,
therefore,
no,
we
but
have to double charge you. Okay, your tax dollars paid for it already, but ignore that point. We have to maintain these sidewalks, so you should be willing to pay a small fee if you want to
Actually,
walk down the street.
homeowners and business owners in New York City, area, you are responsible for maintaining your sidewalks. You are responsible if somebody trips on your sidewalk.
Uh-huh.
However, New York City can come and dig up your sidewalk at any given moment without any recompense to you because it's for the public good. So,
Right.
so
It's private. It's private when it benefits the state,
Yeah.
and it's public when it benefits the state.
yeah,
yep.
but but we got to clean up the MTA. There's corruption throughout,
Yeah,
and
this is more about laundering money. You know what I mean? Like the MTA is only kind of the symptom of this. It's just the convenient hole that they throw the money into. You know what I mean? Like they have
Right, but if you had a-
they have the
Right.
one special drawer. They open up the MTA drawer and let's put some more money in there. And that's what they
in the
use
past,
for
that's-
other things.
but if you had a
It's one of
solvent,
those terrible situations as a libertarian where you hate to admit it, but you would be happy to pay the tax if the tax actually went to the service.
Right.
It was
Oh, yeah.
supposed to be
Yeah,
provided.
exactly.
like I'd be willing to pay more for the subway if it was run better, it was safer and
Yeah.
cleaner and more efficient. I mean, it's pretty efficient, but there's a lot of delays and stuff, and just without warning, and like a lot of
Sounds like you guys
stations
are
that are.
okay with government as a service. Pietro, you'd be cool with that?
Well, the
Like-
problem is it's never efficient. So
No,
Never
it's always
efficient.
corrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, it's-
people.
I mean,
People
public
don't
transport's
pay
public transport.
taxes.
You need the public transport public, but there needs to be like better oversight, and I think you could have privatized security. And I mean, because the problem is, you could restore those three rival companies, but then they could start colluding with each other and doing all sorts of things. Like you're just going to end up with tyranny by corporation instead of tyranny by government. You're right where you started.
yeah, but
It
usually
should be run by a panel of civilians who decide for everybody what the price should be
and
and
that's
how
distinguishable
much to
from
pay the
government. How?
workers.
like
Well, maybe a Soviet.
But see again, people do things because of their own incentives. Okay, the biggest problem with government is that it takes incentives away from people. Okay,
Yeah.
it takes away the incentive for people to be good by making ridiculous rules that people just get to the point where they just don't care anymore. It takes away the incentive to have a legitimate business because when you do, they steal from you. They make so many rules that you have to jump through these hoops. And again, people give up. They say it's not worth it. It's not worth the effort. And my attitude is this is about to backfire on New York in such a big fashion. You have no idea.
Well,
I'm glad they're going to suffer some consequences.
Didn't- I hope
Didn't
so.
the lockdowns already do that though? Like, wasn't there already a mass exodus from New York by anyone
Yeah.
who could leave who wasn't fully on board with the COVID restrictions? Like,
Yeah.
technically,
Yeah.
yeah. But I do take issue with the vote for your feet idea. Like people saying, "Oh, if you don't like it, leave," because that's not always possible for people. Like if I have roots somewhere and have lived there all my life and didn't consent to new tyrannical regulations, I shouldn't be forced to leave my home just to avoid them.
If somebody
No,
built a
but that's a
toll right in
consequence.
front of your driveway and started
Right,
charging,
yeah.
the
I'm like-
solution
I'm
isn't
like, I-
move.
But we're
Right?
not
It's
saying
not
that's a good
insensitive.
thing, okay? We're saying that that's what's going to happen. Like
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Like yes, and it is completely unfair to those that have roots that don't have the means to move on or do something else. They don't have the choices, and that's also part of the tyranny of government is that those are the people that get hurt the worst because they're stuck. It's like being in a rigged card game that you can't leave. Okay, and you're stuck with it, and you know that you're getting screwed, and you don't like that you're getting screwed. But what can you do about it? And this
Right.
is
Yeah. It
again.
sounds like it's hard to undo the damage that government does.
It's very hard sometimes.
How exactly are they enforcing this? Are they putting up a giant structure? Are there cameras that are watching this?
Yeah,
Like, how is this working?
they got plate readers.
Yeah, they have the cameras because, like with the throughway, like they got rid of the toll booths. Now they just have cameras that take a picture of your license
yeah.
plate and you
putting
bill
in the
the mail 6
infrastructure
weeks
that
later.
they will
So-
Well, how long
one day
until those are
use to-
vandalized?
Well,
We are not
Oh, we-
advocating vandalism
we
No,
would
we're
of
not.
public
never
property.
advocate
No, but that doesn't mean people aren't going to do
activity
it.
on this podcast. But if someone theoretically were to spray paint over the cameras or spray paint reflective paint over their license plates, it could interfere with the state's ability to collect tolls, and that would be very, very bad. So no one should ever do that.
Well,
I
that's
have
also the part
heard,
that we got.
but I can't confirm this, that there's like 5 pounds of copper in those cameras.
Wow.
Yeah,
Hey, remember, we are,
yeah.
Misinformation.
Copper sells for
That
a
is
lot of
definitely
money at the
misinformation.
scrapyards.
It's
this
10
is
pounds.
not. We do not advocate for destruction,
No,
damage,
just
and hurting other
Just a
people's
fun
property.
fact.
No, I mean the state should
No,
do
but-
something about the fact that copper is worth so much money and that they make their cameras out of copper. That's not good business practice. They should probably change that.
Well,
Yes.
no, but look at what actually happened in Long Island, in Nassau and Suffolk. Okay, look at the car license plates. Half of them have the paint scratched off of them. Why? In an effort to. Now, I don't know if this works or not. Okay, I'm not saying it does, and I'm definitely not advocating for it. But people will do things like that to avoid this thing. You'll see people who'll make their license plates go away. Because again, how they have to have a method of knowing which car to bill. Okay, and again, this is where the state doesn't think anything through, or the politicians. When I say the state, it's the politicians of the state, because again, what will people do? They'll hide their license plates. They'll change their license plate. They'll do anything to avoid this. And yeah, some of them will get caught, but the majority won't, because it's not possible. What are you going to set the entire NYPD to checking? Are they going to have checkpoints now? See, this is where you're going down a really bad road, because again, they see people avoiding these tolls, right? And they will.
Maybe they want to be.
The high-tech surveillance state. They want a system where their AI surveillance system recognizes you avoiding a toll and just automatically sends you a bill in the mail.
This is a reality in many places around the world. It's not just places like China either. The UK, London has more cameras.
Right, like you lose access to like certain services if like the AI surveillance system recognized you doing something you weren't supposed to. Like,
And
this
it's
is what
completely voluntary. You don't have to go into the city, right? Yes, you do. So nobody's rights are being violated.
this is
How do
actually
we prevent cars on tow trucks from being told?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah,
Don't get told, I guess.
they kind of operate on an honor system. Like, people see a tow truck and they just assume it has the legal right to be there. But yeah, I mean, they're private actors usually. So
They're all registered and licensed.
Yep.
And
But I mean,
so-
wouldn't the cameras scan both the tow truck and the car?
Yeah, and
Probably.
they'll give you the bill. Don't worry.
Yeah. So if your car gets towed
Yeah.
into Manhattan and you're not there, you're
Yeah.
still going to get told.
Yeah.
Of course you are.
It's also just weird that they have it at like 2:00 in the morning when there's no congestion.
Yeah.
That.
You understand, it was congestion pricing, but yet when Manhattan is most empty and there's no one around,
You still have to
they're
pay.
still gonna collect. This is what makes, again, this was the argument that was used in Suffolk County, and the Suffolk County legislature actually voted down the red light cameras, which, by the way, Hochul is probably going to bring back under a state license, but that's beside the point. The point being, this was the same argument that was made. This has nothing to do with safety. Nothing at all. Nothing to do with congestion. It's to make money for the state. That's what it does.
That's easily provable with the red light cameras, because what happens is, because they're making their revenue that way and they have to pay off the price of installing the red light cameras, they actually will shorten the duration of a yellow light to deliberately catch people running red lights. traffic accidents actually increase following the installation of
Rear end accidents. They did a study.
People are slamming the brakes on to avoid getting accidentally running a red light and getting billed. But it doesn't matter to the state because it was never actually about safety. It was about getting revenue out of people. I imagine it'll be the same way. Like they're gonna. Yeah, there's going to be people trying to find alternative ways to get into the city. There's going to be an increase in traffic accidents because people are trying to find ways to get around things. They're driving through unsafe areas or they're finding other ways to try to get around the cameras. But it doesn't matter because the state's making its revenue, and that's all that matters at the end of the day to the state.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you
a little gang out to make money.
I'm going to give you a free business tip. Okay, go north of 60th Street in Manhattan into an area that has a subway station within a block or two and buy as much of that land as you can to put parking lots on it because that's what's going to happen. See, people will see, okay, it ends at 60th Street. Great. Park your car at 70th or 80th or 90th Street and take the subway the rest of the way into town if you can. This is how people will avoid this. And it's like all you're doing is shifting the problem. And then what will happen is as soon as that begins to happen, the city will expand the congestion zone. This is all a game, okay? It's all a game to these people in Albany. They don't care. And guess what? The local politicians are all on board with it. You know, the left has a super majority in the New York State Senate. They can do anything they want. And there's nobody stopping them. And they keep voting for the same people over and over and over again.
But it's hard to make the case to your average person who just wants their problem solved immediately. Like if something is too expensive, they just want to be given money so that they can afford it now. They don't care that will cause the price to rise. They don't
understand why. Like they're people. I know there's a name for this phenomenon. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but like people tend to get angry at like the entity that's the closest to their problem. Like for example, like their rent increases, so they're automatically mad at their landlord. They're not looking at the fact that the property taxes increase, and therefore, in order to not lose the property, the landlord had to raise their prices. Same with grocery stores. Like, I mean, even people who understand economics still struggle with this knee-jerk response. You go to the grocery store needing to buy basic necessities. You see that like the price of a staple food item like eggs has increased dramatically, and your knee-jerk response is to be like, oh, why did they have to raise their prices, those greedy bastards? Like that's the knee-jerk response that most people have. They want their problem solved, and they want the person who they think is responsible to be prevented from making their life more difficult.
I want to start talking about Bastiat and the seen versus the unseen, but I think we were a bunch of mostly normal people, so maybe we can...
We'll have to do a proper economics education stream at some point.
Yeah, although I really think that trying to educate people about economics sometimes makes them feel like they're just trying to be fooled. You know, they're like, look, it's a simple problem. I can't afford X. This is the person who controls what I pay for X. They are raising my price. Just make them stop.
And then the thing that they need disappears completely, and they don't understand why that is either.
Well, if it can't be done for a profit, then the government should just do it.
Typical thought process.
So, all right.
It's just either not available or broken or rotten.
So I'm gonna say this goes back to the New York. So we're talking about the platform in general. I would say it's platform point 2.3, which is voluntary agreements and free exchange.
For anybody wanting to follow along, you can go to lpny.org/platform, and you can see what we're talking about.
Look up point 2.3. Basically, individuals have the right to engage in voluntary agreements, contracts, organizations, groups, and any other free exchanges with others, including the right to trade goods, services, and their time and labor. Okay, this includes the freedom to negotiate or accept or reject terms, ensuring all agreements are transparent and made with informed consent. And the problem is the government perverts that entire process because now this is not a voluntary agreement. This is, I would guess if you took a poll tomorrow in Manhattan, that a majority of the people that lived in Manhattan, even the ones that don't drive, would say they don't agree with this, but it's being imposed, and essentially it's extortion.
But didn't they vote for the people who are making
Well,
these
this
decisions?
is the problem: is that people
Yeah.
vote
You get what you vote for.
politicians without realizing the downstream consequences.
Yeah, but that creates consent.
And then the people who did not consent because they did not vote for those people, they're just
Yeah, but they
caught up in it.
participated in the system, so they consented
Yeah,
too.
that's it. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean,
And if you
you
don't
could make-
participate in the system, then you're just a criminal. So
literally the logic that Osama bin Laden used when justifying why he flew planes into two buildings full of civilians. Oh, well, the U.S. has a democracy. People vote for these politicians who have been declaring war on us and killing our people for generations. So therefore, I was justified in what I did. Yeah, you can go down some very dark paths when you use that logic.
well, so it sounds like we feel that the government exists to do one thing, and that is to protect people's rights. And those rights are actually pretty narrow. You know, you don't have the right to another person's labor or time unless it's a voluntary agreement. So really, what you have a right to is your property, the things that you justly acquired, and that would mean your car, doing your job, you know, continuing to make agreements with other people. And that's about it, right? So if government does anything at all, it should just protect your free ability to do that. So if someone decides they're going to put a roadblock in the middle of the road and charge you money without your consent, that's a crime, and the government exists to stop these road pirates. But somehow, when the government does that itself, it's acceptable, I guess,
Right.
because what? Why? I don't know. We all agreed to it when we voted somehow.
We were born and we signed the social contract by
Yeah.
being born.
Oh yeah, I have that on my wall.
That's
Ah.
it.
All right. So we have the right to personal property. We have the right to trade and engage in commerce with other people. It's not specifically in our platform, but contained within this is the concept of freedom of mobility. So let's unpack that a little bit, because if everything was privately owned and I had to cross, say, Rose's land in order to get to Bob's land, I don't actually have a right to cross Rose's land just because I have a need to get to Bob, right? So Rose could conceivably put up a toll or something like that. Now then, I would be able to go around, say, through Karen's land, but what if Karen also wants to put up a toll? Then I
Did Bob
guess
live there first, and was there an implied easement? Did he homestead the path through my property? We could
Well,
get. I mean, you
let's
can go
keep
on about
things-
this for 2 hours. Just
let's keep
Yeah.
things simple, though. You know, in order to conduct business and interact with other people, we have to exist in physical space, even if we're doing it digitally. You know, the electrons have to transfer power, you know, through physical wires, and even the airwaves are owned, right? So how would libertarians solve this problem?
I mean, how much wear and tear would you be putting on Rose's land? How many people are crossing? A good, decent libertarian neighbor, if it was just you going to Bob's, would be like, yeah, it's just Dan, just pay him no mind. But if her property really truly was being used regularly, like by multiple people, it would only be right to pay her a fee.
Mhm.
She's
This is how the
providing a
first toll-
service.
This is how the first toll roads were built in upstate New York, where I'm located.
Excuse me. Motor Parkway was the first road in Long Island in Suffolk County. So let's. So yeah, that was the first, and it was a toll road. Okay, it was a
Yeah.
private road built by an entrepreneur, and for years, it was a toll road until, guess what? The state came along and took it away.
Yeah,
Damn.
it seems they do that a lot. They wait for something to be developed in the private sector, and then at some point,
kinda-
with some justification, they come along and take it over.
Hijack it.
And then the
Hijack
next
comes along.
generation doesn't
Almost like
understand
piracy.
like the next generation doesn't understand that it used to be private, and then they start thinking, well, without the government, how would we even have this service? Like,
Well,
they forget that the government didn't always provide this for
what
them.
happens is a private company runs into some trouble. It's facing competition. It uses, connections with politicians to create itself a monopoly. So they say something like, well, look at these other roads. They're less safe than my road, but because my road is safer, I have to charge more for it, so nobody's using it, and I'm going to go out of business. But think of the children who are going to die in accidents on this less safe road. So you, government, your job is to protect people, right? That's your only job, but this is how you have to do it. You have to stop people from building unsafe roads by requiring them to build to the same standards or more that I do, and then you can outcompete your rivals that way. Uh, of course, at some point, government, maybe during an economic downturn, might step in and actually purchase the road itself and operate it. How do we undo that? How do we get to a point where everything can be privately owned again and where private companies can't run to the government on safety grounds and make them reestablish monopolies?
And when you get the answer to that question, let me know.
Hmm. Well, I feel like it has to do with the way everything is funded. That's a whole other topic. Fix the money, fix the world is my uh, belief. But given the system we have now, what do we think New York liberty-minded citizens and individuals
From my
could
mind,
do?
it violates people's liberty in the fact that it blocks them from traveling. It literally is a disincentive to travel, and especially like I said, if I'd probably be more angry if I lived in Manhattan in one of those zones, because now you're literally denying me access to my own property. Because if I leave the city, I have to pay a fine, because that's what it is. It's a tax or a fine to get back to my own property. And it's going to be interesting because I would guess somebody's going to sue, and probably somebody with some
Thank you.
money.
And that's
And
what I was going to ask. Is that the at least closest thing to a solution that we can think of, that
probably, I mean,
individuals who are affected need to go to
unconstitutional,
court?
maybe.
I think it's
Well,
unconstitutional.
I
I
think
have
it
to
might
read
be.
more into it. I wish I would known way in advance to
Like I said,
have some time to
I
do
would immediately
research
look
this.
up those precedents and the ones I was telling you about, the bridge cases, because like I
There's a
said,
bunch of case law.
New York City wanted to make all the bridges tolls, and basically the court cases, as far as I recall, we need somebody with a lawyer who remembers those cases, that they were not allowed to do so because that would block people's rights to come in and out of Manhattan, and
So
that's a
it
First
sounds like
Amendment violation. So
it sounds like if concerned citizens want to organize and research and find case law and a lawyer willing to take this on, they might actually have something to work with
class
then.
action lawsuit. You
Yeah.
might get some libertarian donations there.
well, I mean, we can look to Japan because Japan actually has privatized metro systems, like the Tokyo Metro, Osaka Metro. There's various lines also in major cities which are not, at least not directly government owned. Like these, not 100% private, but they're certainly more private than the MTA, and like JR, I think is private. The what do you call it? The intercity rails. Yeah, there's different JRs of different regions, and they're all different private rail groups. And so while they are somewhat monopolistic, again, it's all private. I know because of all the times I had to buy new tickets and change trains everywhere, which is annoying. But I experienced it, and I can tell you that they run just fine. They're always on time, almost always on time. The Shinkansen was actually late, but I think are they private too? The Shinkansen trains?
Even if they are, though, they're still licensed by the government, so
Though they
it
might be
kind of
licensed.
takes a,
Well,
yeah. But
well,
that's
airlines
that's
are
how
licensed by
government
the
controls
government
stuff.
too.
Is
Yeah, but like it works. It's efficient, and they are more privatized than, say, the MTA. So we could look
Right.
at, and there was a whole museum. They stayed the whole story how they were private and they were government owned. And it was falling apart. They were bankrupt, so it was privatized. and now it runs better again.
Well, it sounds like we need to eliminate government's ability to stop competition.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right. That's
So
why
that's-
monopoly laws are actually, they're pro-monopoly, because the monopoly laws are not used to actually break up monopolies. They are used so that only the companies that have the favor of the politicians are the ones that succeed. And
Uh-huh.
that's a
Right.
big problem.
Right. Antitrust laws are like in practice, generally what happens is they'll drag a company into court, accuse them of holding a monopoly, and then all of a sudden that company starts making large political donations and they stop being threatened with antitrust legislation.
All right. So
Is that
libertarian solutions are pressure government to get out of the business of monopoly formation, sue them where possible, vote with your feet if possible, as unfair as that is, and choose to do business in ways that avoid these added costs that government has imposed with its actions?
yeah, all these legal things that we recommend.
Right, and we'll leave out the copper and all the other stuff.
Well,
Don't feel
the problem is a lot of those solutions, like leaving, voting with your feet and all of that, are the best of the last of your options. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
When there's no other solution, the best option would be to have the court systems actually enforce the constitutions that we have, because most of the laws we know, especially libertarians, we all know that they're unconstitutional. They were specifically, they're just designed to avoid the constitutional issues. You know what I mean? It's ways to skate around them without actually, causing them to be overturned. And New York tried it with the gun laws, with the Second Amendment. They tried it until it finally got a case to the Supreme Court. And as soon as they did, they're like, no. So what did New York do? They removed the law, said, okay, it's gone, and then reinstalled it 2 weeks later. Like, no.
Because there are no repercussions for passing blatantly unconstitutional laws, and these things take years and years to work their way through the court system. So, yeah, okay, it gets to the Supreme Court eventually. The politicians who pass them can say, no harm, no foul. We didn't know it was unconstitutional. So then they just pass a new one and then repeat the process.
No, but they actually passed, New York City passed the same law, like identical wording. Okay?
Yes.
Again. So,
because it will take years.
So they withdrew the
before
bill.
it gets before the Supreme Court.
and
I
then,
thought libertarians were in favor of nullification.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's the other thing is that this is what people do, and we're not advocating for any of this, but the things like scratching out the license plate, that is a reaction to a law that everyone knows is unconstitutional. Is that they will use methods to avoid detection by the government.
It feels like the whole society we live in becomes more broken and more criminal, less civilized, as a result of the consequences of government actions and policies.
Remember what I said before about incentives? Okay.
Right. And if people refuse to acknowledge that and get involved and take some responsibility and try and hold their politicians accountable and do the legal things we were talking about, over time, their options get worse and worse and worse.
Yep.
Leaving with your feet sounds bad. Being a criminal sounds bad. Having society fall apart around you because all the businesses have moved away and everybody is unemployed sounds bad. So maybe we should get on this now. Maybe people who are even remotely concerned about this should speak up.
When people ask you, why should I go up and object to these laws being passed, and why should I stand up against these things? Well, look at your alternatives. Look at what happens if you don't. And this has been a big deal. And this is why are there a bunch of these wacko libertarians tilting at windmills? Because we see more than the next 5 minutes. We see what's about to happen, or the downstream consequences to our society as a whole, not just even as us individuals, but what happens when you incentivize an entire population to want to break the law. Okay? Again, it's not a matter of you should obey the law. It's if the law is unjust enough, people will not obey it. The problem is when they do it once, then it makes it easier to do it again and again and again until that anarchy word, which by the way is completely misused, it becomes a lawless society, and now you have major violence, you have bad things happening, and that's the worst of all the consequences. So
that is a wonderful way to wrap up this conversation, unless anyone has anything to add. Well, then anyone who wants to know more or get more involved can visit our website, lpny.org. There are some links there to get more involved or to donate, to find out about ways to get involved locally. If you have a county affiliate, you can get involved with them. And if there isn't one, you can start one. Ask us how. But otherwise, you can also email us. I forget what the email is that we decided to use here. Bob, it's at the end of the podcast when you run the credits, though, right?
right, yeah, it is. Just look at the end of the podcast. It gives you all the contact information.
Can also find us on Facebook and X and most social media platforms, and DMs. We will respond to them.
And here on Rumble.
That's right. And they would find us everywhere except here on Rumble at, what is it, Rose? LPNY? What would the name be on X or Facebook?
I think it's Libertarian Party of New York, or it's at LPNY official.
Okay, well, there you have it. All right, guys, that was the Liberty Test. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Where will you be when the order is given to censor your mind as free speech is forbidden, as martyrs for peace from the world will be driven away by the sound of a bellowing thunder and choke on the blood of a dream going under? Tear up our Constitution, and from every direction we cry revolution, standing together and without permission, soldiers for truth in the war of attrition, the love of our country as our